Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode with me, Mr. SmartHub, in our channel at Thriving SMEs. And like we promised in our previous video, we talked about business registration. You can see it in our playlist. We're going to go into details and explain more details about each and every of the business forms that one can register in Kenya. And today we want to talk about a limited liability company. And to say this, the majority of the businesses in Kenya are in this form. So I want to define the word limited liability. And this is what it means. A limited liability means that in case of a death or an injury caused by the company, one can now go to personal properties of the owners in order to recover the liability. However, this clause has a limitation in case where there are wrongful omission or commission on the part of the company in a principle in law that is called lifting the veil of incorporation. When you lift the veil of incorporation, like for example, when somebody is, it's literally like from a wedding. When you lift the veil of the bride, you want to see the face of the person behind the veil. So when you lift the veil of incorporation, you want to see the true owners of the company or the true owners of the business so that they can be held culpable by themselves, since the company can only act through human beings. Remember, a company in law is what we said is creating a separate legal entity or creating almost an equivalent of a human being. But you know that creation lacks certain capabilities, like it cannot talk, it cannot give an opinion, all those. So when wrongs are committed, the law allows for people or for one to go behind the people who own behind the company to recover or to make good of the wrongs or the liability. So I want to explain some key features that are or entail a limited liability company. One, it's called the perpetual succession. Remember, in case of a sole proprietor, in case the owner passes on or dies, the business ceases to exist. In case the owner is declared bankrupt or mentally incapacitated, the business automatically comes to an end. Now, in this case of a limited liability company, remember we said the owner and the business are two different persons. In case this one happens, the business will not stop to exist, or the company will not cease to exist. Those are we say it outlives the owners, or to continue living beyond the owner's life. Should it be a single director shareholder and the person, the company will still continue to exist. It will be taken over by other people or something like that. That is one of the features of a limited liability company. The other feature we said is the limited liability clause, that one cannot go to personal properties to recover a debt or liability. They can only go to the extent of their shareholding. So in case a company is indebted, or in case, let's say for example, there are tax issues, there are properties that are owned by the individual owners in their names, one cannot recover, maybe sell a car, a property, a land, so that they can recover their debt. It's only what is owned by the company that can be used to recover or can be applied on the liability. That is the limited liability clause. The other one is what we called the company can enter into contracts under its own name. You see, my company is called XYZ Limited. So if you are partnering or you are entering into a contract with another company called ABC Limited, the contract will be between ABC Limited and XYZ Limited, and not myself as the owner or the other person as the owner. They will only act on behalf of the company. Since the company cannot sign a document by itself, so the directors or the owners will sign on behalf of the company, but the real contract is between the companies. That's why we say a company that can enter into a contract in its own name. We go to the next point, and that's when we call the company can sue or be sued under its own name. In case there is a breach of contract or a wrong committed against a company or a limited liability company, that company can go to court or can be taken to court as a company by itself and not the owners of the company. If somebody sues XYZ Limited, they sue XYZ Limited, XYZ Limited is taken to court, but not the owners of the company. And that's what we said now. Remember, we said you create a separate legal entity. You create like another person, but different from the owners. So the company issues are separated between the owners and the company. The company deals or handles its own issues, and the person is dealt with differently. So that is another feature of a limited liability company. The other one, we said it can own properties under its own name. You can own land, you can own vehicles, you can own a building, you can own anything under your own name. And the XYZ Limited, in this case, we are going to use XYZ Limited as our example. So if XYZ Limited want to buy land, it can buy that land under its own name and not the owners of XYZ Limited. So those are the salient or the key features of a limited liability company. In case you might want to consider and take advantage of those features, it's always recommendable. Maybe you'd like to separate yourself from the business. You might want to consider registering a limited liability company. And what are some of the requirements? One of the requirements actually that has really simplified the process is initially under the old act, the old Companies Act, you had to be at least 2 directors. But nowadays, for a limited liability, private limited liability company, you can be a single director shareholder of a company. So a single individual can own a company and run it and does everything that pertains to it. Unlike before, where you had to be at least 2. And also it has a capping though for the maximum number of people, up to 50. You cannot exceed 50 owners or 50 shareholders in case of a limited liability company. So it has really made the process of registration quite easy, because what I've seen before, people used to pick somebody for the convenience, because you cannot register by yourself. So you get somebody, then down the line, years later, there are conflicts, there are issues that emerge, you cannot run the companies, you're involved in tussles here and there. So the company end up being, stalling or not doing what it was intended. But now with the new act, you can be a single director shareholder. And also another good thing, in case you have somebody whom you had joined, you might want to remove them. It also gives the old companies now under the new act, you have a chance to do that. You can add, you can remove with a lot of flexibility. So you don't have to stick to how you register the company. But now the challenge or the issue that you need to be careful about when you're removing somebody is that they have to agree. They have to consent. There is a process that is undertaken, and one has to agree that they are not resigning out of coercion or they are being forced to resign, but rather they're resigning voluntarily, or they have wished to resign from the company. So you have to have some goodwill of the other person, so that they can be able to make the process to be a bit smooth. If there are issues that need to be sorted out, it's always important to sort out the issues before now you proceed with the process of adding or removing. The processes are quite easy and doable. So in case of any help, you can always get assisted. And then I want to go to the requirements. We have talked about the key features and what are required. What will be the requirements? So I want us to look at the requirement. In the case, let's say for example, I want to register a company. Remember, we said we have to get 5 names in order of preference. The number 1 being the most preferred, all the way to number 5 in that order. So if you prefer number 1, if it's available in the name search, it will be registered all the way to number 5. So the way the system is doesn't allow you to search, reserve the name, and then you do the registration. In case among the names that you've given, any of them is available, the name is reserved, and now you proceed to doing the registration. So when it comes to registration, there are some key areas that you need to pay attention to. One, most of it's what we call the shareholding. The shareholding is simply these are the people who own the company, right? And there are different type of shares that a company can issue, but in most cases, we have what are called ordinary shares. Ordinary shares are just what we call them ordinary shares. The type of shares, maybe that would be another story for another day. So one of the key element you need to understand is the number of shares that you want to issue or you want to have and their par value. For example, I want a company to, and shares this is where actually the company raises its capital. For example, you want to raise a capital of 1 million shillings. Then I need to know, to raise that 1 million shillings, do I need 100,000 shares, each at 10 shillings? Or do I need 100 shares, each at 10,000? All that kind of a thing. And also there's an element that is always key and important to remember at this point when you're talking about the shareholding. Something called stamp duty assessment. For example, if your shareholdings, the number of shares times the par value is the value of one share, exceeds 100,000 shillings, then automatically you'll be assessed for what is called the stamp duty. And that's an amount that will come over and above what is payable to the registrar. So most of the time, you find most of the companies, especially in Kenya, will have a share capital of about 100,000. The share capital being 100,000. So if you want to raise more capital, you can always do the changes later. You can do share premium. You can have directors adding more capital. But most of the time, because of avoiding a lot of fees and levies, most people restrict their shareholding to 100,000. So that is very important. Then these shares are allotted, or they are given, to use a simpler language, to the director shareholders, or to a shareholder. A shareholder, who is a shareholder? A shareholder is a person who holds or owns shares in a company. For example, we are two of us and we are issuing 1,000 shares. Before we do the registration, it will be very important to agree the number of shares each one of us is going to hold. Are we going to do 50-50? Are we going to do 20-30? That one can always be agreed. And if you're a single director shareholder, you can just own all of them, or you can take part of the shares and leave the others unissued. So that if maybe in the future you might want to add someone else into the company, then you have unissued shares which you can allocate them. So those are two scenarios that you can use. But also when you have fully issued shares, you can also undergo the process of forfeiture and now add someone else and allocate them shares. These things are quite easy, and you can always do that without a lot of difficulties. So the number of shares, their values, and the person, and how you're going to allot or allocate to the different people that are shareholders in the company. So the another item are now the requirement on the part of the directors or the shareholders. The following are the requirements that you need to give to share when you register in the company. Number one, of course, will be their ID number. When you give their ID numbers, the system is able to auto-populate or generate their details. If I input the ID number today from the eCitizen or the BRS system, automatically I'm able to pull their details and add them as the director. So interlinking of the system, the government system also has made it a bit easy. Initially, was used to upload the copy of the ID, but now that has been made simplified by that. Another thing is their telephone numbers, their email address. You also need their physical address details, the house name, the floor they live in, and the house number for the directors, shareholders. All that information is required. And also another thing that you need to also have or give is the director shareholders KRA PIN. Automatically, and also sometimes you find it, the feature is available where once you give the ID number, the system also generates picks or auto-populates or generates the KRA PIN number. So some of this interlinking is making the processes quite easy. So you don't have to upload the KRA PIN and all that. So the system is able to pick all that. So that is the requirement of the part of the director, shareholders. Now we go on the part of the company, because the company is assumed to be domiciled or to be registered with a certain location. For example, you're in Nairobi, you're based in Westlands, you're based on Modhithi Road, TRV Towers, second floor, office number 20. So these are the requirements that you need to give. So you'll give the name of the road, the building that you're in, the floor, and the office number. However, in case you don't have a physical location where maybe you intend for your offices to be, you can also give your home address. And these are also sometimes very challenging, especially when you live in an area where, there's not very defined, some of these features are not very defined, maybe a road, or you live in an upcountry setup, or you live in your own home in a upcountry. So your house doesn't have a name. Maybe you can use, let's say, for example, if in my house, I can call it Smart Hub House, so that I'm able to give you those details. So some of these details might not be very easy to capture, but they are required when you're doing or undergoing that process. So that now, in case something in the future somebody might want to know who is this person, where do they live, and all that information can be shared, and it's a key information. The next point that you're going to look into is the details. We've looked at the details, we've looked at the shares allotment, and once you've now shared all that information through the BRS, the company registration option, your name has been reserved. Now you go through, it takes a number of days, but at least you can take 3 days and above, depending also on the workload, I think, at the BRS, Business Registration Service. After you've now finished the process of registration, you get 3 key documents. One is what is called a registration certificate. A registration certificate will say XYZ Limited registered on 29th of January, the year 2025, under the seal of registrar. That is document 1. You also get another document, what is called a CR12. A CR12 simply shows the details of the company, the directors, the owner, the physical address, their emails, and all that. And another document that is now happening nowadays, though sometimes it's not very guaranteed, I'm not sure about that, you also get your KRA PIN certificate. You remember, when you're registering, we said we need an email. And during that process, you're supposed to give an email address that is not used on iTax. So you might need to register a new email, or you use an email that is not used on iTax platform. So that this email, that's where you get, or you'll be sent your KRA PIN and the logins once the registration process has been done. So once somebody is doing for you the registration, make sure you'll get those 3 key documents: the registration certificate, the CR12, and the KRA PIN. And maybe sometime you also find you get registered for, initially they used to be called what was called NHIF, and even an NSSF number, so that you don't want to, you're getting all this under one roof, so that when you register the company, you don't want to now start again and go register for the statutories, the NSSF or then, and the NHIF. So you get them during the point of registration. So that really makes a bit easy for you to start doing your business in Kenya. Actually, you would say you hit the ground running. Within a week, you can have your company registered. So In case you might want more information or some of these services, feel free to get in touch with us. And as I sum it up, for me, it's just to say thank you and God bless you for the viewers, the comments, and even liking our videos. Remember, at Thriving SMEs, it's where business thrive and not survive. Thank you. God bless you. Keep sharing, keep watching, and see you in another episode where we will be talking about partnership. It's a form of business, and maybe you might want to hear a thing or two before the registration is done. See you then. Bye bye.